Okay, welcome to everybody to yet another NOVA Scribes. Sorry, hold that thought. All right, let's go ahead and start. So again, welcome to NOVA Scribes sketchnoting for virtual events. I'm going to cover basically three ways that you can sketchnote virtually. Okay, first way is going to be using a webcam and big paper. Hint: I'm doing it right now. Okay, this is how this works. Second, we're going to take a look at using a document camera and little paper. And then third and finally, we'll cover iPad and using Procreate. Now, let me just say that there's a lot of tools out there that you can use for digital scribing, which is what this is often called. I'm mostly going to be covering Procreate. I think that the two big ones out there are Procreate and Fresco, and we can talk about the pros and cons of each one of those, okay? And by the way, here's what I would say. Just because of the setup that I've got now, Rachel is correct. Chat is a good way to get your ideas out there. But if I'm rolling on something, I may not see it. So I'm going to invite you to just go ahead and go off mute, speak your mind. I will hear it, and I'll address whatever's coming up for you. Okay? So let me just run through these. So first way, and I think for me, it's the most comfortable way that I have to do sketchnoting or graphic recording, as we say for virtual events, is just to take a really big piece of paper like this and to have a webcam pointed at it and to just go for it. Okay. Ideally, the webcam would be able to be moved a little bit. Now, this particular webcam is a neat one, and I'm happy to share a link later on. Let's see if I've got this working right. Yeah, this one actually does have a little bit of AI built into it. Okay. So you might notice that it's tracking me. Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Right. That it's tracking me. There it goes. As long as it can see my face. And I can instruct it to zoom in, zoom out, but pretty much follow me. Okay. So all you really need in order to make this work is a big flat piece of paper or a big flat wall. Hang a big paper on it as if you were graphic recording in the room. Aim the camera at it and you're in business. Okay. Hi, Canon from Japan. Paul says, ooh, future. Okay. So before I move off of this one, what questions do you have? That's basically all it is. You get a big piece of paper, you aim a camera at it, and you're in business. And again, if you want to go off mute, if you want to, chat something, I'll see it, and we can talk about it that way.
I'm just imagining like when doing the big paper, I take it you just shift out. How do you keep up with like keeping up with the space, I guess? Do you just move further down, use a new paper?
Yeah, I love that you said that. So one good thing to do is to have the whole thing on wheels so that you can slide it back, do some wide angles, slide it up. Okay. Spacing is a really good thing to think about regardless of the kind of capture that you're doing. So let's take a second and talk about that. Now, good news is I've also got all of my markers right here with me. Okay. So let's say, for example, that you're recording something that is, I don't know, let's say that it's 60 minutes long. Okay. And let's say that you've got a big paper like I do that is about 8 feet wide and about 4 feet tall. Okay. I'm going to zoom you in for this one just so we can see a little bit more, which is, it's on wheels. Okay. When we are, and remember, this whole thing is about 60 minutes long. Okay. So about 15 minutes into this, I want to be about a quarter of the way through the space that I've allotted for myself. 30 minutes in, I want to be about halfway through it. And then 45 minutes, about 3/4 of the way. So that right when we're getting to the end, when that speaker is finally wrapping up, I'm finishing up the last image on the chart that I've allotted. Okay. Rachel, what do you got?
There's a couple questions about what type of webcam you use and what
Mhm.
is the computer sitting on. Feel interested
So
in your setup.
let me sketch it because I don't know if I can actually show you the webcam using the webcam. That's a little tricky.
Could you
But
roll it over to your other camera,
I'm sorry?
your other screen?
Not easily. It would be a little
Okay,
tricky. But I can draw it for you. Does that work?
I love it.
All right. And Rachel, maybe you could do me a favor and find the link to this. I'm using what's called an Insta360 camera. Okay.
Okay.
By the way, for those of you that know him, I got the recommendation from Muddy Schlegel. And so if Muddy says that it's a good piece of tech, it's a really good piece of tech. So here's my setup. I've got a big piece of paper. Okay. I then have just like a work table, okay? And then the work table has some wheels on it, got some casters. And then I've got my laptop kind of set up like this. And then I've got my webcam, which is on a little tripod, sitting on the camera that's tracking me so that as I'm working over here, it's capturing what I'm doing. Okay, is that a decent enough diagram? Cool. So Eliza, I think Rachel just dropped in the webcam type. Karen, I think that hits it as well. Okay, so it's just a table. It's a work table on casters. Cool. Any other kind of general questions about big paper before we move on? And I'll show you something else. All right, let's do another one. So let's go to the next one, which is document camera and little paper. Here's what that looks like. Here we go. Boop. Okay. So a document camera, actually here, let's do it this way. Let me show you what the setup looks like and then I'll mess up the setup so you can actually see it. Okay, so this is kind of the effect. So this is something that I attended on the Washington and Old Dominion Railway, the WNOD, one of my favorite places in the Northern Virginia area. And as you can tell just from my hands, I was sketchnoting at this size, which is 11 inches by 17 inches. Okay. Now above me, right here, I've got what's called a document camera. Now, unfortunately, I have to mess up the setup to show you what a document camera is. Okay, here we go. So it looks like a little gooseneck type thingy. Okay. And I had to prop it up a little bit to give it enough distance, but it's fully articulated, so you can move it around. Let me turn off the AI for this one. It's fully articulated so that you can move it around. It's got a focus button up here, but that's pretty much it. Think of it as sort of like if you remember those old school overhead projectors, pretty much works the same way. And it just has a camera, points down at whatever you want to use it with. Now, before I did the digital, really got into the digital, that was a lot of the remote graphic recording that I would do. So, I'd be listening to the speaker, of course, and then have the setup like I just showed you a second ago. I'd be able to go into some of my smaller markers and sketchnote whatever it was that was coming up. Okay. And that's it. That's pretty much all there is to it. You don't have to have a document camera in order to make it work. You could take just a regular camera. In fact, let me show you an option for that. Going over to my other computer. You could take just a regular computer. Hey guys, can you still see me? There we go. And thank you, Rachel, for spotlighting me properly. You could take just a regular camera and mount it overhead just like that. Okay. And you're ready to go. All righty. How are we doing? Good? Rachel, noticing any questions popping up?
Nope, no questions.
All right. Well, this is going to be an easy one.
I have one. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, lady.
Yep.
Go for it.
What kind of lighting are you using?
And whatever I can. I'm blasting it with as much as I possibly can get. So I have, let me see if I can actually aim at it. Rachel, if you don't mind helping me out again. Rachel, by the way, thank you for jumping up and doing some tech hosting. The kind of camera that I'm using is an IPEVO, okay? IPEVO, that's the document camera. I don't think they make the exact model that I use anymore, but that's a good thing because hopefully they've advanced since the 5 years ago. Okay, Lady J, let me show you the lighting. All right, we'll go back over here. Hey there. Let's see. We're going to remove this spotlight. There we go. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go a little bit behind the scenes. Hopefully this will work. Hello. Now I've got, among other things, I've got some track lighting. Okay, that's sort of spotlit a few things, but what's really, really blasting my light out is I just have some 4-foot LED shop lights. Okay. And actually, as long as we're here, let's take a look at this. Here's a view that not very many people take a look at. This is the back of my green screen. Okay. And if you can tell, behind the green screen, I've got these two other shop lights. that are hanging down and just blasting the back of it with light. And when I
You've
do
got a
that,
whole studio.
I've got a little bit of space. I'm kind of lucky like that. But it
Yeah.
blasts the back of it with light. And the reason that I'm doing that is so that there's no hot spots that show up. When you've got hot spots that show up on your green screen, it's almost like, there's shadows that you just don't want there. It's an easier way to balance out the light. So Lady J, how well did that answer your question?
You did well. I have a problem at home whenever I use my cameras.
Okay.
And I thought it was just because all of my experiences with stage lighting for theater,
Mm-hmm.
I'm never satisfied with my lighting. So I wanted to see what you had there.
Actually, there's a really cool app that you can use. You did some stage lighting?
Yeah, I've done theater stage, but those lights they're huge and they're hot. And at
Yeah.
home, I'm just balancing lights all over the place. And then my wall isn't white, it's lavender.
Okay, that might be a challenge to the light. I'm with you. There is a really cool app that you can get called Green Screener. Okay. And what this does is that if you've got and Carol, I'll get to your question in a second, but if you are trying to balance your light out and avoid any hot spots. So what this is showing right now, it's kind of simulating what hot spots look like. This is a way of really exaggerating the hot spots so you can play around with your lights and even them out a little bit. Now, in front of me, I've got a ring light right there. Let me see if I can't show it to you. Maybe. Might have to tilt it up a little bit. No, it's just a little bit out of range. But anyway, the ring light's right over here. And then I've got a fill light that's over here. Ring light over here, fill light over there. Okay. Karen. So what I mean by 4-foot lights. So if you think about it's called a shop light, but it's about 4 feet long. Traditionally, it had a 4-foot fluorescent tube in it, but more recently they've moved to just straight LED. Okay. And Shauna says I have an InSwan document camera. It works really well. Those are good ones too. Okay. Hold on a second. There's stuff on my screen. Let me get rid of this. Boop. There we go. Paul, will you be talking about your mic? Not that it's crucial for drawing. It's not, but I did just get a new one and I really, really dig it. Okay. So the cool thing about this one is, what's nice about a lavalier mic, here, I apologize if it gets a little scratchy for a second, but what's nice about a lavalier mic is it follows you. And as I'm moving around my studio, this kind of mic, that's not going to do me a whole lot of good. And what I found is even if I'm turning my head from looking at my participants to drawing on my tablet, right? That would actually vary the sound, and it goes like quiet and then it goes loud again and then quiet and then loud again. So I'm really liking the lavalier mics. This particular one, it just has got a little transponder unit like this, okay? And there actually comes with the receiver, which is plugged into my computer right now. But that's the transponder, okay? It is a Holly Land. Thanks, Elisa. Okay. All right, let's get into some of the good stuff. So I think by far the most common way, besides the, more so than the large drawing big on the wall and small with a document camera, is to actually use an iPad. So let's talk about that. There's a way that you can actually take your iPad, plug it into your computer, have your computer believe that what it's seeing is actually just another webcam and you're in business, okay? So first I want to show you what the setup results in. It's this, and actually it doesn't have clip. There we go. It's like this without you in front of it. I'm doing something else so you can actually see me. But this is what it looks like. So basically, again, you're tricking your computer into thinking that the feed that it's seeing from your iPad is just another webcam, okay? And so I've got Procreate running here. And if you know anything about Procreate, let me just show you the setting on this one. Here we go. Okay, so I've just turned off what's called project canvas. And interestingly, it's blanked out. There we go. Okay. So this is probably the view that you're used to seeing. And if you notice, there's, you know, if I touch anything, my tools pop up, my colors pop up, my brushes pop up. This isn't necessarily something that you want to show off when you're drawing in front of people. And so if you go into the settings right here and then get into preferences, there's this little button that says project canvas. Okay. And if I turn that on, it gets rid of the graphic user interface and it just shows the final image. Okay. So let's tear this apart and take a look at the hardware side of things. All right. But before I do that, what questions do you all have for me? Anybody ready? Because once I unplug it all, we're not going to be able to go back to this. So what questions do you have about this before I start showing you kind of the guts of it? We good? All right, let's tear it up. Here we go. So studio camera. Here's what's going on here. You need really just 3 pieces of hardware to make this work. Okay. Well, 4, including the iPad. So of course you've got an iPad. Now I prefer the iPad Pro with a pencil. It's much more natural. You can draw with it. Okay. And by the way, this is not necessarily a workshop on Procreate per se. That's a whole thing by itself, and I'm probably not the best person to teach you how to use Procreate. I just learned by fooling around with it and breaking it like several times. You need your iPad, you need a pencil. And I would also say one other thing that's really worth picking up is one of these things, which is a tablet glove, okay? So let me go ahead and put it on. If you notice, it covers the 4th and 5th finger of my hand, of my drawing hand. And the result is that when I'm drawing, it protects my hand and it pretty much makes it so that I'm not also touching the screen. So I can lean on the screen without actually setting off any of the touch sensitivity that's there, okay? All right, so that's piece of hardware number 1, and that's the most expensive piece is your iPad with a pencil and a tablet glove. Now let's take a look at the connection. First of all, you need something that can connect into your iPad. Now for me, this is just kind of a cheap adapter that you can get on Amazon. On the one side, you've got a USB-C dongle, that's what it's called. I don't know who thought of the word dongle, but there it is. So on the one side, you've got a USB-C dongle right there. And then here, all you really need is an HDMI out, okay? So you got a USB-C to an HDMI. Now Apple makes one, looks like this, okay? But these things, for whatever reason, are notoriously finicky. I've had them break and just stop working in the middle of a job. So I personally don't like the iPad ones. When I do a job, I have at least one and then another backup because these things can be pretty fragile. Okay, so again, USB-C to an HDMI. You with me so far? The next thing that you need, of course, is your HDMI cable. Okay, so just an HDMI to an HDMI. You're ready to go there. Now, the last thing that you need, the thing that really makes the magic happen, is this little doohickey right there. Okay. Now, this is called a video capture card. It doesn't look anything like a card, but that's just what it's called, a video capture card. Again, you can order one of these things on Amazon. It might cost you about 10 bucks. But the way that it works is that on one end, you can plug in the other end of that HDMI cable, like that. And then on the other end, it's just a regular USB. Now, this is an old USB. They probably have them with USB-Cs now, okay? Doesn't matter which. But what this is it's not just an adapter. There's a little bit of, there's some electronics in there that turn the HDMI signal into the same kind of thing that your computer would expect from a webcam, okay? So again, an HDMI capture card, this thing, will turn the signal, the HDMI signal, into what your computer expects to see from a webcam. So you plug it in, okay? Plug it into your computer, and then you go into Zoom, and you pretty much just tell Zoom, the same way that you could switch your webcam into something else, like this, okay? to switch to that new video feed that you're going to see. And you're in business, and that's all it takes. Okay, so that was a lot. I'll tell you what, let me sketch out what I just said so you've got something to refer to, okay? While I'm doing that, feel free to come off mute. You can ask questions. But here's the setup. So you've got, on the one hand, you've got your iPad. I don't know if I spelled that right or, capitalized it correctly. Then you've got a dongle. That's what it's called, where you're going from USB-C to HDMI. Okay. Then you've got an HDMI cable. Okay. And then you've got your video capture card. You Google that, you Amazon that, whatever, you find it on Amazon. It will take you to what you need to. And on the one side, it'll say it's an HDMI in. And on the other side, it is whatever kind of USB you want to use. So USB-C or whatever else that's there, okay? You plug that into your computer. I drew it kind of far away. You plug it into your computer, and then you get into Zoom, where you select the video, assuming you're doing this in Zoom, where you select the camera and you just switch cameras. And just like that, you are good to go, okay? All right, Sarah says, I'm curious if you played around with Sidecar and Universal Control for the iPad and MacBook paired together. Sarah, I've never done that because I'm not a Mac guy. I'm not rich. Maybe you have and could speak to it? Sorry.
Nice. So I mean, I've only tinkered around with it a little bit, and I think the answer is basically it's not as strong of an option as the one that you've just demonstrated with the HDMI capture card. But basically, if I understand it correctly, and maybe there's someone here who knows it a little bit better, if you have an iPad and a MacBook, any type of like Apple laptop, you can use Sidecar or Universal Control. They're two different things. One of them extends your computer screen to the iPad, so it's like an external display. And then the other one is like the vice versa. It extends your iPad display onto your computer. So theoretically, you can draw, like use your iPad as a drawing tablet on a file that's on your computer. I've only played around with it a little bit, and it's a little clunky, I'll say.
Yeah, I've used, when I've been on the road, I've used things to use, to your point, like my iPad as a second screen, as a second monitor, so that it, I was trying to draw like some sort of continuity between screens here. The trick is that when you do that, you're limited to whatever's on your, your desktop computer or your laptop.
Yeah.
I really like Procreate for the iPad. Now, you did say that it works the other way too, where you could have something like native to the iPad and then, share your screen with your laptop. I've never tried that before.
Yeah, I think it's limited because it doesn't just, you can't just use Procreate on your computer. It's an iOS app, and so it doesn't actually translate over to the computer. So it's kind of limited in that sense.
Right.
I will add that also if you're screen sharing, usually that means you have to share your screen. The way Brian did it is that basically instead of him showing his face, it's going through his video feed. So it's not screen sharing. So it's a little bit of a different place where people can see it. So it's like they're different places, different output sources for that. And then also on a different topic, Brian, can you talk about how you use PowerPoint and your other tablet to facilitate and draw?
Yeah, sure. So this goes a little bit beyond scope of what I was going to talk today about, because today is really about sketchnoting and graphic recording. Okay. So I do a lot of facilitation, which does not have to be nearly as pretty as graphic recording. And to Rachel's point, my way of doing that is pretty much treating PowerPoint as if it was a flip chart. Okay. So I've got, a tablet here. So this happens to be a Wacom Cintiq tablet. So it serves as a second monitor. It's also touch sensitive. It's also, pen sensitive, stylus sensitive. And then all I do is with PowerPoint open, that's what I've got. I just create a new slide and I start drawing, okay? And I can get across whatever idea I wanna articulate, okay? Again, it's not pretty, but for quick sketches, for quick visualization, I just find it really fast. And then when I'm done with this, I can just drop it into an email and send it to whoever it is I'm talking to with no other cleanup, okay? So yeah, that's using PowerPoint, kind of like a flip chart. Rachel, did I get your thought on that one?
Yeah, I just thought, I know, I've seen you do this, so I just thought we might articulate a little bit because I know people are seeing lots of different tech and things coming through this session.
Yeah, it ain't pretty, but it works. Okay. I'm going to go back to my other board. Rachel, thank you for moving the spotlight around. Okay. Cool. Welcome back. Welcome back. I want to try something. Now, some of you may have noticed that we have moved away from charging people to do this. So with that in mind, let's see if this works actually. Please donate. Okay. If I did that right, there should have been a link that just popped up in chat. If you want to, buy us a cup of coffee, whatever you want. If this was at all helpful to you, just, pay what you want. Okay. And like I said, there's a link in chat for that if you want to do that. All right. Are there any questions that you want to bring in before we do? I'll stop the video, or I'll stop the recording rather, and we can kind of dive into the weeds of doing some stuff that might be a little bit off script. Any questions before we switch?
Not seeing any.
Okay, then I will go ahead and stop recording. And thank you very much for attending. Here we go.